If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel. And yes, the sunglasses are back, which can only mean one thing. It is time to get back to reviewing albums. Since pretty much from after the Destroyer 666 album came out in early December, took a break from talking about albums until we got to some substantial releases here in January. Even though January is still kind of a slow month, well, at least the first half of the month is pretty slow. So far, the second half of the month looks a little bit more packed as far as more albums I want to check out, most particularly for Under the Radar. But with that being said, we're starting off 2023 with a review of one of the big albums that was set to come out in 2023, and that is, of course, the newest offering from one of the pioneers of death metal in general, especially the Florida scene, and that is Obituary with Dying of Everything. So yeah, of course, the brief little history about Obituary for those who have been living under a rock. This band formed in 1984, originally under the name of Executioner, and then changed their name to Obituary in 1988, and you know me, I love their first three albums, Slowly We Rot, Cause of Death, and The Incomplete. That is the triple threat of classics for Obituary. World Demise was a really good album, but not my favorite, and then really after that, kind of an uneven period, even breaking up in the late 90s and then reforming in the mid-2000s, and since the mid-2000s, again, still trying to get their footing, but it was really with their last album, the self-titled that came out in 2017, was really where Obituary truly felt like Obituary. And now, yeah, it's been 5.5 to 6 years since then, but this album had been done for quite a while. It's just pandemic and all that shit happened, which gave them more time to kind of retool some of these songs and kind of expand on them a little bit and see what would happen. And here we are with Dying of Everything. So, how does this album go? Well, there's a lot to talk about on this album. It's only 10 songs, it's 45 minutes nearly, and it is basically classic Obituary with some old elements that I felt was kind of missing from the self-titled. Even though I absolutely loved the self-titled album, I feel like this album kind of brings back some elements that wasn't quite felt on the self-titled, such as creepy atmosphere. Like, throughout this whole album, there is creepy atmosphere just drenched on this entire album. Like, in terms of, like, how they build up parts within the songs, whether it's through, like, atmospheric drum work, or, like, dive bombs on the guitar, or even John Tardy just going bleh in the background to really get the song pumped up. But when you kick things off with a song like Barely Alive, which is probably the thrashiest song of the album, and it's just furious, it's vicious, and that's a thing I always love about Obituaries. Whenever they get into those thrash moments, they know how to thrash with the best of them. And I even love how whenever John's saying the song title, he starts off his voice a little lower and then builds his way to the higher gutturals, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, like Barely Alive and then the title track that shows up around the middle of the album, both were the two, like, thrash-oriented tracks, but Barely Alive was definitely much more thrash-forward than the title track. But the title track, like I said, it's got those thrash feels, but it also gets doomy, especially in the breakdown. Like, the breakdowns on this whole album have a nice balance of trying to keep up with, like, some triplet chugs, some groove, or even some doom breakdowns, like in the title track. And in that title track, the breakdown gets very sinister with the atmosphere, and especially the riff that follows the breakdown. Song like The Wrong Time has more of an atmospheric start with the drums and guitar progressions, and then it gets into that signature Obituary groove. But yeah, this is definitely the one song of the album that felt the most basic out of them all. It's still a good song, but definitely, in my opinion, the weakest of the album, and thankfully it was only the second track. Without a Conscience, pretty much, like, Without a Conscience, My Will to Live, and even, like, yeah, just My Will to Live and Without a Conscience have those classic, like, halftime Obituary grooves laced through. Like, Without a Conscience, it starts off in that classic Obituary fashion, but it has more atmosphere in the beginning. And this track as a whole feels like it could have been a B-side on The Incomplete. And the triplet chugs on here were just fucking fantastic. And the breakdown reminded me a lot of Slayer's Raining Blood in the breakdown. The song War very much feels like they're almost paying homage to Asphyx and Bolt Thrower. Like, it starts off with war samples and war drums, and then just the building atmosphere that happens pretty much all throughout the song just made the song make me feel a lot of hype for this song. And even in the chuggy grooves, catchy riffs, even an acoustic guitar pops up for just a brief moment before it just gets into these catchy riffs and grooves. Fucking love this song. And then back to the track My Will to Live. Yeah, it starts off more or less in like the Cause of Death era of Obituary with the riffage, and that riffage continues throughout. But there is a slight Celtic Frost influence in some of these riffs too. And I love the build-up in the middle of the song that leads into the breakdown and to some dive bomb atmospheric leads. But speaking of that Celtic Frost influence, that is 100% felt in the following track, By the Dawn. Starts off with these like doomy and haunting guitar progressions that instantly made me think of Celtic Frost Monotheist, or maybe even Asphyx again. But the rest of the song feels very much in that Celtic Frost groove of like the 80s material. And even with some tremolos and double bass work throughout those Celtic Frost grooves. And even another cool fucking triplet chug shows up, and definitely one of the catchiest songs up to this point. And then, yeah, like Weaponize the Hate, again, similar to the song War, brings in more of that bolt thrower feel. And I love how you hear these like little explosions on the drums and the drum fills, providing atmosphere while you hear nasty tremolos going on. Torn Apart, nasty crawling riffs and drums. And then it enters into a galloping chug similar to Carcass's This Mortal Coil off of Heartwork. But instead of being melodic, it's more brutal. And then we get to the final track, Be Warned, which might be one of the doomiest songs I've ever heard Obituary do. Like, this is straight up a Death Doom song. And it feels very close to Incantation in terms of just the disgusting sounds of it. But it feels also a lot like Hooded Menace, like particularly Never Cross the Dead era Hooded Menace. And that is definitely felt in the first portion of the song. And also those little melodic progressions you get on this track really add to the creepiness of the song as a whole. But yeah, top to bottom, you get a lot of catchy riffs, memorable riffs, great hooks. And of course, the production, it's got some beef to it. I know some people might say it's a little bit thin. Maybe at times it does feel thin. But I thought there was plenty of beef. After all, it was mixed by Joe Sincata, who's done mostly work for Suffocation since Suffocation came back. But also the mix, I think, was fairly even kiltered. Like, the bass is there. You can hear the bass, but it's more fuzzy and it fills out the sound. The drums sound great. The guitars are more forward in the mix. So you can just hear the pummeling brutality, but yet the catchiness of these guitar lines that you get. The lead work on this album was more or less done for taste, like whether it was in the dive bombs, it shreds sometimes, and there's even some melody being showcased, like in songs like Torn Apart and By the Dawn, where they have some really cool melodic moments. Of course, the drums with Donald Tardy, he's got a signature style to his drums that I absolutely appreciate. And of course, John Tardy's vocals are still fucking gross. I fucking love it. So overall, What a way to start the year off. We are starting off with quite possibly an Album of the Year contender. I am gonna go crazy and give this a 9.5 out of 10. I think this album is on par with the self-titled. I'd have to listen to both albums back to back to determine which one I like more. But I do love how this album brings back more of the creepy atmosphere that you love from early Obituary, but still maintaining a little bit of the modern feels from the self-titled and showcasing their influences loudly and proudly. So yeah, 9.5 out of 10. We're kicking off the year with a fantastic one. But what did you guys think of Dying of Everything by Obituary? Let me know in the comments below, and until next time, horns high, and I will see you later.